it's cool to see everybody on here. Man, this is a big crowd today. This is kind of unusual. I won't be nervous though, I don't think. No, it's fun to see so many new faces on here. So welcome to what we normally do on Fridays at this time. And as Paul said, we normally, it's just shooting from the hip, what's up on the heart, breaking virtual bread, just connecting like this. So this is kind of a break from the normal routine. But I'm happy to do so and to kind of share what's been on my heart, what Father's been walking me through for, well, really for the course of this year, since early spring, when he began to crack open some things around the word now. And really, to preface it more, he's been teaching me really about living in the moment for probably about a year now, really going deeper into what it really means to live in the moment in the midst of a structure of time and space. And so, you know, two main verses that I will probably pull out of today, and I'll probably spend most of the time in the second. The first is Hebrew 4, which we all are familiar with, specifically verse 12, where it talks about Yeshua being that dividing tool, that blade, that sword that cuts or pierces, right? And it's sandwiched into a framework that deals with entering into the rest, into the Shabbat. And the Hebrews writer in that chapter talks a lot about why, in the first half of it, he talked about why Israel couldn't enter the rest. And it centers around unbelief. And then it then dives into Yeshua as our cleaner, butcher knife that cuts and divides and separates. And it's kind of interesting how the writer inserts this into this idea of entering into the rest. And then he sandwiches it back in about going back, finding a way into the rest now while there's an opportunity. And then that Yeshua is the way to access that now. So from that context, I begin to dive into what does it mean to enter into the now and how to stay in the now. We're so focused on time in the culture around us. Everything is about preparing for the future, not living in the regrets of the past. But we're so bound by the timeline of history, and a lot of our focus is on the future, right? And often that focus is fear-based. A lot of it is cloaked in wisdom. Be wise about what you know. Make sure you're planning and making sure that these bad things don't happen to you. We don't call them bad things, but we preempt them. We preventative measures per se, right? We don't want to look foolish, so we preempt the possibility of these foolish situations or these hurtful situations. A lot of those preemptive actions are based out of fear, and we don't really realize that until we dig into them. A lot of preventative measures are to save us from pain and hurt. And that context by itself alone is a fear-based context because you're afraid of something bad happening to you in the future. And so we make all these preventative measures to avoid hitting those things that are vain imaginations because they haven't happened yet. But we live so much into the future that we don't realize that we're missing out on the now. And the Shabbat Shalom, the place of rest, is where the now exists, or the now is the Shabbat Shalom. And so Hebrew 4 cracks open the gateway, reveals a gateway of how you get into the Shabbat Shalom. What are the access points? Even the writer of Hebrew points back to David and to a few others in the Old Testament talking about, well, today is still the day. Well, the day is now. And that's the word really, and you look at the Greek, it's now. While it's now, make haste, strive, rush into this opportunity while it's now. And it's interesting because we always talk about striving. We shouldn't strive. But this one case, this one area in our development as sons, as daughters of Yahweh, is to strive to enter the rest, because of the effort that it takes to enter and stay into that rest, or stay in that rest. Striving is necessary because it's not natural to our corruptive state, and natural to the corruptive realm around us. And so we're working to push into and to stay in. So Hebrews 4 is about getting into, or how to get into it. And I'm going to focus on the second half of it. And I'm thinking, as I'm saying this, I probably should spend more time on Hebrews 4 too, because that's probably just as important. But the second half of this is staying in the rest, which is coming out of Peter 2, or 2 Peter 1. Excuse me. 2 Peter 1, specifically starting at verse 3, and it goes on through verse 12, where Peter gives you this idea of entering in and stay. Once you've entered in, how do you stay in? He gives you an alchemy of ingredients to maintain the status of being in the now. Before I dive into the actual text, one of the things that led to this whole exploration of living in the now, living in the moment, it came out of an encounter I had with my father, rather with all three of them. And I entered into a black hole, and inside the black hole, I was actually able to see, my sight was inverted so that what was dark became light and what was light became dark. So I was actually to see what's inside the black hole versus what's outside of it. And in that place, he began to talk to me about time and time shards, and how within our being, we have the capacity to decode these shards of time that we call the timeline of humanity, and begin to break down and change, unlock decode them, and be able to speak into the time shards, thus affecting the entire timeline of our history. And from that, again, to branch off in this idea of living in the moment. And he gave me an example of, have you ever seen those Tesla coil? You can kind of see that, like the curiosity shops where you got the static ball and the electricity's coming off on the plastic sphere out around that surrounds it. You put your finger to it and it touches. From that imagery, he began to build out this idea that when you live in the now, you actually stand in the center of that, and that time extends out of you, past, forward. And like electricity or like lightning, when it tries to find its path, it looks for the right, it's looking for the path. Matter of fact, have you ever seen a slow-mo video of lightning strikes? Really, really slow, like 3,000 frame rate slow. You can see how the lightning seeks out a path. But we can't see with the natural eye because it's faster than a second, right? And it's interesting how it does that. And he began to talk to me about how your future does the same thing. There's all these possibilities in your future, and that you are constantly looking in nanosecond, maybe even faster than that, your future moments. You're testing all these different patterns, different ways, possibilities of your future. The problem is that because of fear, we are unable to really map that out well, and fear influences our direction. But when we enter into the now, we're able to tap into the multiple possibilities of our future and our choices, because we are in a rest. And now we have the capacity to unlock the resource of heaven, to unlock the resource for our future. And it goes more. There's more to that, and maybe I'll have some time to dive into more of that whole idea. I can break down some of the more details. The overarching idea from this is that when we live in the now, we are standing where time and eternity meet. We become the portal through which the eternal resources of our Father, his kingdom, comes through us and meets everything around us. It meets our future, it meets our past. It deals with our past issues, it deals with everything coming in the future, because we're standing in the now. It's basically a framework or a portal where time exists but doesn't impact you, impact time. And in that gateway flows the resource for your future. And it's kind of interesting because it not just flows through you, but it also attracts your future. And so this was out of an encounter off my grid that a lot of this was unpacked. And then as I sat before wisdom and began to engage into my bench with this and with the Father and with the Son and the Spirit, they begin to bring out this revelation in scriptural format, tying the two together. And this is where I ended up in Hebrews 4, ended up in 2 Peter. The first verses of chapter 4, verse 3, he talks about entering in the rest. And on the seventh day, God rested from all his works. And again, he says in the passage above, and this is quoting just above, they shall never enter my rest. And what he's speaking of here is back in the Old Testament where Israel came out of relationship, broke covenant out of their unbelief. And you see in verse 6, it says, since then it remains for some to enter his rest. And since those who formerly heard the good news did not enter because of their disobedience, God again designated a certain day as today, Greek word for now, with a long time later where he spoke through David, where he said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. So what we're seeing is he's packaging the idea that Israel could not enter into the now, into the Shabbat Shalom, the day of rest, his rest, because of their disobedience. That disobedience was born out of the unbelief. Their unbelief kept them from, and that unbelief really was based on their lack of fear, because of the fear, their lack of trust. You could look at the testings that Yeshua went through in the wilderness as the primary fear points. Where he succeeded, they failed. That's why he had to go back in the wilderness and succeed the tests, because he was coming back and fulfilling what they failed to do, which was, are you really who you say you are? Are you really my source? And what Yeshua did was he stepped into that and perfected those things. He fulfilled those tests. Because of their unbelief, they were kept out of the rest because they didn't trust him as their source. They didn't trust him, didn't believe, their belief didn't align up. And therefore they stepped into disobedience. Their fear of his lack of who he was and what he was supposed to be for them kept them from entering in the rest, because their fear turned into disobedience. So he sets this premise of saying, because of this fear, because of this unbelief, you can't enter and rest. But now there's still a time, there's still a now where you can enter into this rest. It is still available for those who will enter in by faith. You're taking your faith with the truth that you know, and you're mingling them together. And the Greek word that they use there, the writer's using, is basically a synergistic thing. An idea of synergy is when two things work together, they produce something greater than what the two could create by themselves. Okay, the sum total it's greater than the sum total of the two. And so what this does is this unpacks, or it unlocks the portal through your faith, mingle with truth, to enter into the doorway, And it's kind of like, it's a moment thing. It's not just something in the future or in the past, it's right now. It's tied to the moment you're in, the split second that you're consciously aware. In your mixing of faith and truth, you create an opening where you step into this. And that's how you engage. You can't engage it in the future, you can't engage it in the past, because it's in the moment. So the fear and unbelief keep us from entering an end. And one of the ways they showed me was like this. I was standing in a room with this door that was going by me and just going around me in a sense, and it was passing in front of me. And that was my split second moment right there. That's another moment, another moment, another moment. And I have an opportunity to jump in while it's now. If I hesitate, then I can't step into it. And my hesitation is built out of my fear. Kind of an analogy that he gave me was, well, it's happened a few times in my life. I'm sure it's all happened at some point in our life, some form of this example, or where you're engaged in some environment, maybe sitting in a park bench, maybe you're sitting at a restaurant table, and while you're there doing your thing, eating or engaging in whatever you're doing, someone walks by and something drops into your spirit in that moment that says you need to engage with this person. You need to go talk to them. You need to say something. You need to connect with them. In that split second, that is the moment where we either choose to walk in faith or we hesitate in fear. What do they think? What are they going to think about me? Maybe I'm just missing it. And then if we hesitate, the person continues to walk by and we miss the now moment for that opening, right? And what's interesting is, for me, what happens when I hesitate to step in the now, my unbelief increases. It becomes even stronger. It sometimes, in that scenario, it sometimes formulates, and maybe that was just me. Maybe there's a bad pizza, or maybe I've just had bad stomach ache or something else. I begin to disconnect from that missed moment, and it actually serves to strengthen my unbelief for the next time, so that when the next moment comes, now I've got a precedent, locked in fear, locked in doubt and unbelief, that now I have to overcome that as well as the current moment. And so you can see the cycle continues to increase itself and reinforce itself. When we stay in the fear, it builds upon line upon line upon line. And this is what led Israel to be kept from entering the rest, because of the unbelief that was built up over time. And so it makes it harder to jump into it. This is why we need Yeshua. This is why he comes along and he gives us, and you see at the end of chapter 4, where he becomes our grace and our mercy. Right. First of all, and this is where the insertion of 12, verse 12 comes in play, because what is in us makes it impossible, because of that precedent after precedent after precedent of fear built up and unbelief over time. It makes it impossible to ever enter the rest. As long as unbelief is sitting in us, we can never enter the rest. So Yeshua has to come along like a butcher knife, and he has to flay us open. And he has to pierce the inner core of our being and begin to clean us and remove that which is causing us to enter in, keeping us from entering in. And it's really interesting, because the description that they use, and you look at the Greek word, it's like grabbing someone by the scalp of their head and taking the knife and slitting their throat. That's the flay open that is described at the end, where Yahweh is using Yeshua as a way to expose. We become exposed, everything in us gets that level of exposure, so he can clean us to the deepest parts. It's a very aggressive, intense piercing that we're talking about here, in order to cut out everything. So the dividing of the emotions, the thoughts and intentions, the deep emotional thinking versus the reasonable thinking, all that stuff packaged in verse 12 is all part of cleaning us up, so that we can once again come to that doorway and enter in. And then on top of that, after he cleans us up at the end of 12 or end of verse 4, he talks about being our grace, our mercy, gives us grace and mercy. These are lubricants in a sense. These are empowerment properties. Grace is in the Greek is translated as favor. And then the mercy, I love this. It's translated as, can be translated as covenant loyalty. He gives us covenant by his covenant loyalty, his word, his good opinion, which ties into Peter, 2 Peter, that relationship with him, he gives that to us with his favor to propel us into the moment. So he cleans us up, removes unbelief, and then pushes us through the doorway. All right. And he empowers us to fly into it. And this is the idea of getting into the moment. And it's done through a relational knowledge of Yeshua, cleaning us and bringing us in so that we don't miss the opportunity. And this is the other thing with that. Time is actually mercy. Father was talking to me about this. Time has actually been a slowdown of destiny, slowdown for us. And it's mercy because we miss the moment all the time. Corruption keeps us out of the moment. And time is a way for us to come back to that moment again and again and again and again and again. Maybe this time, maybe this time, and this time, and this time. And he slows things down so that the judgment's rushing to us, right? Because when he spoke, we were judged. Our corruption is pulling our judgment to us right now. We are not going to avoid our judgment, except for the fact that Yeshua has made a way to escape it, right? And so, Father, slow down the rushing judgment at us and giving us countless opportunities to enter into the Shabbat. And this is where time is a mercy factor, because now we miss the moment, there's another moment right behind it, and another one right behind it. And so it's still coming, judgment's still coming, but we have a slowdown to that cliff, and Yeshua comes along, cleans us up, lubricates us, pushes us into the portal so that we miss the judgment altogether of our corruption. And we become, we're able to then go into the rest. And so I even as much as we hate time as being so sluggish, we want things happening faster. This perspective of time as a mercy element for our victory and our overcoming is so much more beautiful. And I'm more appreciative of delays and the idea of patience, being able to know that I'm still working out this ability to stay in Shabbat, Shalom. And I appreciate having the time to do it, to learn it, and to become successful in it. So in Hebrews 4, I've just packaged a bunch of stuff and I've shotgunned that to you. And you have time, go through and just look at that again. And if a lot of this is opened up by looking at the Greek words and understanding really what the writer was saying in the Greek. And that helps a lot to see that stuff. But Hebrews 4 about getting into it. So let's jump over to the 2 Peter. Now that you have entered into it, you'll see Peter uses a lot of the same Greek words in describing staying in or accessing the resources that are in the gateway. There's tie-ins to this. So in Hebrews 4, we talk about faith, applying truth or faith to the truth. That's your belief, so that it creates a synergistic alchemy or ingredient concoction, so to speak, super potion that you access or use to get into the gateway of sitting in the now. And then Peter says, okay, so now that you're in the now, we're going to talk about how to stay in the now. All right. And so in verse let's get into that. 2 Peter 3, or to 2 Peter 1, verse 3. He starts off with, it says, his divine power has given us everything we need for life and godliness through the knowledge, the gnosno, and the knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and excellence. Okay, just unpackage this real quick. So right here, and we've heard this verse a lot, right? This is where we draw a lot of our belief system from. Everything we need for unlimited life is here. It's given to us. His divine power, Ruach HaKodesh, has given us the ability to walk eternally in this physical frame, to have everlasting life, eternal life, so forth and so on, right? Because he has given it to us. And verse 3 unpacks us, gives that higher, a high level understanding, right? And the idea there that it comes through the knowledge, and this is a critical part of Hebrews 4 and this chapter in 2 Peter, the knowledge of him being Yeshua HaMashiach, our elder brother, Jesus Christ, the knowledge of him. The word knowledge in Greek is not just gnosno, that you talk about having experiential knowledge, like I observe my environment and now I've learned information from it, okay, by experiencing it visually, physically, and in my senses. This is an epignosko, which means an emphasis on the experiential knowledge. It makes it an intimate experience. So it's not just, I know so-and-so. No, I have a deep, intimate experience and reference point in this person. And so I have a knowledge that is intimate, right? That's the knowledge that is used, or the Greek word used for that word knowledge. So through the intimate knowledge and experiential revelation that you have with Yeshua, this is how you gain, this is how you're getting everything you need for life and godliness, right? So that's key. All right, and then he's called us, the calling, and this is where we talk about, making sure you're calling, right? This is the calling that he is calling us by through his opinion, a good opinion, which is that glory. It's kind of an inherent goodness or perfectedness, or the Greek word, it says really it's a good opinion. And wherever you see this word in the New Testament, Greek word, it's always a positive word, opinion, right? And a lot of times it's translated as glory. And basically it's an inherent good opinion. Not really a better word for it. It's inherent in who his nature is. It's by his own good opinion and by his own moral virtue. And that's what excellence can translate as, moral virtue. He has called us. So by his own ability and his own good name and his own good character and his own good capacity, his perfect capacity, he calls us into this divine connection, this divine nature. And everything that we have to live in that divine nature is come through that relationship. So you can see how a relationship with Yeshua is critical for living in the now. Right, so that's just in verse 3. We move on into verse 4, and talking about participating in the divine nature. We become partakers. We escape the corruption of the world, which is based in fear, which is based in unbelief. We escape. When I talked about that earlier, how he lubricates us and empowers us and pushes us into the now. That's the escape. Our escape hatch for the judgment rushing at us because of corruption in the world is living in the moment in the resource of heaven. With that, in verse 3 and 4, setting it up, he jumps into verse 5, says, for this reason, make every effort to add to your faith virtue. And here we're going to unpack the ingredients, the alchemy of living in the now. And making every effort is the same word of that is used in Hebrew of while it's still today. Get in, make haste, strive, There's translations, there's different translations for that same Greek word, and that is a aggressive reaching out or rushing towards something to grab a hold of, to participate in, to hold and get into it. Okay, so it's a very forward-moving idea that he's setting up here. While it's still today, make every effort to do these things, and that is mixing. And here's the word. So I'm going to get into the words after this, so you understand as we're going through the words what we're building upon. The word add is a very interesting word, and I really don't like the term here. I have to find a different, I'm using Berean Study Bible. Some other versions have a different word. But the idea is a mixing, a lavish mixing, or richly adding to. It's actually, let me actually pull up the word. It's a really kind of interesting word. So epichoreography. It is basically where we get our word choreograph from. And it's basically two words, epi, all right, just like an epiginosko. So it's an intensifying. When you see epi on a Greek word, it usually is intensifying, or is an amplifying of the preceding or the next word. So it's intensifying the idea of rich supplying everything needed for an ancient chorus to be a grand production. Properly, it means lavishly supply, that is suitable and apt for something that needs to be done that's of grand scale. Okay, so that's the idea of thinking about putting on this massive Broadway play, musical. Everything that is needed to make this thing be a huge hit success. All the finances, all the resources, all the manpower to make it a rock star show. That's what you got to have in your mind when it talks about lavishly mixing or applying. Okay, so we're just lathering this thing up. We're going to use everything. We have all the resources. It is going to be the most expensive knockout production you've ever experienced. Okay, that's the idea of this word add. Okay, lavishly supply. So what Peter says is you have to lavishly supply to your faith virtue. Okay, and then he adds to that, and he says, and to your virtue, knowledge, and to your knowledge, self-control, and to your self-control, perseverance or endurance, and to your perseverance or endurance, godliness, or in the Greek word, it's well worship or veneration. Okay, so it's a worship is a state of worshiping, but excellent worship. So you're applying that to your endurance, and then to your well worship, you're applying love, brotherly love, Philadelphia. Okay, it's that alpha I can remember the Greek words, but alpha phileos is the Greek word, brotherly love. And then to your brotherly love, you apply agape love. All right, so each one of these, you just imagine having faith, and then you're just slapping on, lathering on without any hesitation and without any.
What did I do?
You're just lavishing on the next one. So you're creating this mixture of ingredients of these 7 words, 8 words, and you include faith to this alchemy. Okay, and each one of these words are really dive into them. They unlock a capacity unto themselves to expand the dimensions of this alchemy of maintaining your place in rest. And I'm just trying to think whether I should dive into each one of these words. I did go through the chance of going through the Greek for each of these words, and I love looking into the Greek because it really unpacks dimensions to the English word that are kind of missing in the first glance of reading it, and it packs dimensions. So, for instance, just taking like the word virtue, All right, so you have faith, right? Which is this word in itself that is expansive in and of itself. But you take faith and you add virtue. And the idea of virtue is a moral excellence that is displayed to enrich life, right? So you are actually using an expose of your faith. You're taking it and you are displaying it to enrich your life and the life around you. That's the idea of the virtue we're applying. The knowledge is gnosko, which is also the experiential knowledge that we're applying to our virtue. The next one, self-control, mastery or self-domain, self-restraint. These build upon each other. And they actually, what they do is they improve or they help the one preceding it. For instance, self-control allows you to manage the knowledge that you have. It allows you to come and tie it with wisdom, and you're able to have dominion over your kingdom, self-government. You take that knowledge you have, and you know how to manage the knowledge through self-government. And sometimes that gets wearisome, and that's when endurance comes along and perseverance. So you stick to it, right? And you stay focused on the path, even though it gets tiring sometimes to manage and to govern something. Endurance comes along. Endurance is sustained and established and upheld by worship. When your endurance gets weary, what do? You turn in and you worship, and you regain the resource to stay in the place that you're supposed to stand, governing over the knowledge and maintaining your faith. Love comes along, brotherly love allows you then to turn your worship, support your worship by operating in a QRST environment with love, with your brotherly love, right? And this is then supported by the agape love, which is a preferential love. So it turns your brotherly love into a place where it becomes working and is effectual in supporting the ecosystem of family, because now you're differential to those you're in love with. And that extends not just to brothers, but then to humankind and to nature and to creation. So these build upon each other and they support each other, and then they create a ingredients that is synergistic, okay? So once we've got this ingredient and we're actually now having it in surplus, having it in supply, having it in lavish, rich supply in our being, and we are having it active, Peter talks about with this, we are able to then stay in or enter into the gate of heaven, which is the resource and the supply of eternity that's in the now. But here's the interesting thing, prefacing that. He says that when you make this mixture, this alchemy of living in the now in great supply or richly applicable to your being, and the word that he uses here, make these exist in great number in you, you'll never not stumble out of the Shabbat, not ever once. The idea of never stumbling. In this passage, he uses Greek words specifically to highlight, emphasize that when you operate in this alchemy, and when it's in great supply in you, you'll never ever fail. You'll never stumble. There is two Greek words back to back that said no, not. And then he ends the statement with a never ever. So he's parentheses or quotations around, in the sense, the idea of stumbling. You'll never ever stumble when you're operating in the now with this alchemy. And then he goes on and says, with that active in your heart and active in your being, you have access to the gateway, and you're able to sit in the gateway for the source to flow in and out of you, for the eternal source. So there's never a ending of that flow out of your being and into your world around you. The earth, right? From heaven to earth, as we are the gateway, or we're the ladder, we're the temple through which earth and heaven, the temporal and the eternal, are connected. So this gateway, it flows through, and we sit in it and have access to it because we sit in the Shabbat Shalom. And then he finishes up and says, therefore, brothers, strive to make your calling and election sure. Again, there's the striving, tying back to Hebrews 4. While it's still now, make every effort to get into the Shabbat and to remain there. It says, for if you practice these things, you will never stumble, and you will receive a lavish reception into the eternal kingdom of our Lord Jesus, Savior Jesus Christ. So it is an invitation. It's a pulling into. When we engage with these things, we never stumble to enter into and just remain in the Shabbat Shalom. So one of the pictures that more recently he gave me, what it's like if you want to think about remaining in the Shabbat Shalom, is that of like a children's merry-go-round at a playground. Those, those death traps, those metal death traps that spin around really fast, and kids just hang on for dear life. And it's usually the big kid that's outside swinging the thing, spinning as fast as he can to see who can fly off, who can get to come off, right? So the idea is that when you're on the outside of that merry-go-round, you're holding on for dear life, right? You're using everything your faculties and your strength to maintain connection and not get pulled off by this centrifugal force. Every child knows this, that if you'll start sliding towards the center and holding on to the center pole, the pressure is diminished greatly, because the force is less, is diminished greatly on your body than it is when you're on the edges. And so the picture here for me is that when we enter into the Shabbat Shalom, the pressures decrease from those things that try to draw us out. Okay, and the deeper we go into the Shabbat Shalom, and the stronger the anchor of living in the now, the pressures, the worries, the anxieties, the sower of the field parable that he uses, those things that get into us, the little foxes throughout our day that deposit little seeds of fear and doubt and discouragement and despair, all of those things lose their impact to pull us out of the moment, because we have grabbed a hold of, and we're using that alchemy of those 7 elements, and engaging in that rich supply. Those forces diminish greatly, and we're able to stay in the now at every moment of our day. And that's the idea that he presents through that merry-go-round, is that I'm stepping into that Shabbat Shalom, and I'm going to press into the center of it. And in that, the eye of the storm is almost nothing there, right? There's no wind, it's blue skies. It seems like perfection that I'm standing in, even though there's chaos whirling around me. Yet in the center, I stand in the middle of the now, and I'm not pulled out by fear or doubt or worry or fret or anger or fear or whatever emotions that would be the hook that would draw you. And this is, I think, also is pictured in Yeshua's life. The reason why he could say there has nothing in me, that, the enemy has nothing in me. There's nothing they can hook onto to pull me out of who I am. He walked in perfection of the now. He walked in the moment, and all of his needs, all his resources came to him. They flowed out of the eternal realm that he was connected to all the time, and it flowed out and met his future. He didn't worry about where he needed to be, because he was always in the now. And when he was in the now, he was where he was supposed to be every moment. And in that every moment, he was also then able to tap into the resource for that moment. And he lived in that model example. And so when he moved about chronologically around in his environment, he looked like he was everywhere he needed to be perfectly. And in every resource and everything that he needed for that moment was there. And he stepped into it. And this is where he stood and lived. And this is where he could say, there was nothing that the enemy could do to pull me out of it. No doubt, no fear, no worries, to cause him to step out of living in the now that he was walking in. And as a picture for me, it gives me an understanding of, because this is one of my questions has been in this journey, is how do I live in the now in a world that lives outside of the now, that it's designed to keep me from living in the now? And that's the real challenge, isn't it? Because the world doesn't know how to live in the now, and yet we're called to live in it. And they're working hard against us entering in, of accessing what we're supposed to be. And so I'm beginning to see that here's the beauty of living in the now, some of the things that I'm experiencing, and I'll finish it with this. As I've practiced this and pressed into it, I have seen my Father move things around me and cause shifts where I had needed nothing of my own energy to do it. He shifted time, he shifted resources while I was in the now. He was able to shift things, because part of the reason that we can't see things move is because our unbelief blocks him from doing things on our behalf. Because of the legal access or lack of access, because of our sovereign being, when we live outside the now, our fear keeps him from moving on our behalf. But when we enter into the rest, the fullness of his resource and government can come down and into and out and meet our needs, even when we are not interested. This is what is encased in the idea of seek first the kingdom, and all these other things will be added unto you. So when I sit in the now, I'm seeking first the kingdom. He goes on my behalf and deals with those things that need to be addressed. And there's just the simplest, this is like really a simple example, but in my job, I'm beholden to my boss's requirements for me and my time and space to be here doing their stuff, right? And that sometimes butts up against what Yahweh's want me to do. So Father's been teaching me, if you'll just seek me, seek first the kingdom, then I will unlock these things. I'll take care of them. And as I just by faith stepped in and said, okay, I'm going to take this moment and seek the kingdom, he would do that. Simple emails would come in. Hey, urgency, something's got to happen. I got to get this fixed right now. Right. And I'll just put the email aside. I'll step in and I'll do what's in the now to do. And by doing that, it opened up a portal, allowed him to move on my behalf behind the scenes. And when I was finished engaging with what was needed in the now in the kingdom, I turned back to the email in my inbox, and there's another email. It says, no worries, it solved itself, or it took care of it. We figured it out. Over this past year, I can't count how many times this has happened. That's just one small example. The urgency, the tyranny of the urgency of the world around me that's living in fear and chaos, pressing on me, Yahweh said, shh, be quiet. I'm dealing with my son. I'll take care of that. And that's the adding unto. Seek first the kingdom, and I will add all that. I will take care of that. That falls under the all category in that passage in Matthew 6. And that's just a small example. And that's just a little kiss of the Father of what he's capable of doing on our behalf when we choose to seek his kingdom, to choose to sit in the now. He moves heaven and earth on our behalf because we chose the best. We chose what was really what he said. I'll take care of all the other stuff. I'll take care of the 99%. You just do the 1%, seek first the kingdom. All that stuff that yes, I need a man in my heart. Turn in me, I'll deal with it. And so he's going to continue to stretch in that manifestation as we press in and begin to see the beauty of that alchemy. But that's our job, is part of seeking is being attentive to step into the now and to remain in the now, so that we can access the resource for everything we need for life and godlikeness. This is what I've seen. It's come out of a relationship with Yeshua. That's how you can access it. That's the only way you can access it, is in relational connection with him. And Peter makes that clear. Hebrews 4 makes that clear, that it's a relational dynamic that allows you to enter into that thing. Apart from him, this is why we always say you can't enter the kingdom apart from Yeshua, apart from Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth, the life, right? And we use that mantra a lot, and it's true, but we don't fully understand the capacity of what that statement means, what it contains, and what it holds. And it is through a relationship that with him that really unlocks the full potential of what it means to live in the now, and what it means to access the unlimited resource for our future, for the now and the past. He's shown me is that now is, that the symbol, let me backtrack, the symbol for infinity, right? The figure 8 on its side, right? That's not actually a mathematical number. It's not a number at all. It's a symbol for what's not a number, but it's used in mathematics to contain something that's not, it's not a number. It's a way to describe something that is outside of math, in a sense, okay? But it's still a mathematical symbol. The same way we speak of now is the way we look at now is the same way. This is how Father showed me. Now is not time. It's a moment. It contains something, it can be pointed to in a timeline, but it is not of the timeline. It supersedes the timeline because it's a connector point of the eternal. So when we sit in the now, we actually sit out of time. All right, Adrian, good to see you. We sit out of time looking at time. It's kind of an intersect or crossroad where time does overlap the now, but it is not a actual time event, and it's something other. And because of that, it accesses something that is beyond the 4 dimensions of space and time, and that is, we understand, is the eternal realms of our Father that are disconnected or not influenced by time. And when we can access that gateway of now, then we can access that which is not time and space to impact time and space. And that's the kind of the way I see it is. It's, even though we use it in a reference of time, just like the infinity symbol, it's not mathematical, it's not a number. Now is not time, even though it gives us a point of connection for what is outside of time and space. Living in the Shabbat Shalom is the tension of being able to walk through the storm, the valley of the shadow of death, and not be living in the fear that exists there, that you're untouched, right? This is the key to Psalm 23. And he trains us by he leads us through by the still waters. He lays us down in the pastures. Green pastures are the training times for the heart, so that when we do walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we don't fear evil, because we've already been calmed. Because we learn how to live in the Shabbat, we can manage through those valleys, and we can sit in the presence of our enemies and feast. So in the midst of the storm, we lay in our boat and we are not messed up by it. We can stand up and say, shh, shalom, okay? And tell the storm to be what it needs to be. But when we get pulled out and we're anxious, that's when we know, okay, we're out of the Shabbat. So I'm going back to the tension of living now and then dealing with the future. Because how do we plan for the future when I'm just thinking about now? Like, how does that work? This is my question to him. this is the tension of it. He gave me this example, and I think I told the team this a while back, but the imagery that I saw when I asked this question was, I saw when I was sitting with him talking about this, and I asked him, the scene shifted, and I saw in the spirit a man, this big gallery of people. Think of an art gallery, right? But there's a keynote speaker, the artist or whatever. He's dressed in a tuxedo, and he's glad-handing all of his benefactors and people he's in relationship, and he's just in the moment, enjoying them, and he's loving on them or whatever, right? And he's purposely engaged with them. But at the same time, he sees somebody up on the balcony that he knows that he's supposed to connect to. Now, the immature would say, excuse me, I have to go talk to this person. And they push through the crowd, and everybody that's around them becomes a block to engaging that person, right? And so they disconnect from the moment of the person in front of them to go chase after this person they're supposed to engage with. That immature response gets them out of the now. That's the moment where they're engaging to go chase their future. But the mature response is to recognize that's my future, and it's going to come to me without me having to lift a finger. Wow. So I'm going to continue to engage in this moment, this person in front of me. I'm shaking their hands, I'm engaging in the moment. And just by staying in the moment, that future moment comes to me. See, the now, when you sit in the now, you become magnetic to your future. Your future and your resources come to you. You don't go after them.
Good.
But the moment we step out of that and we chase the fear of our future and our hopes and our dreams, and I've got to leverage this and I got to make this happen because you said I'm going to be this, is when we step out of the provision, we lose vision. Paul, thanks for that. We lose vision of the true sight that we're supposed to have in the now. And fear drives us out of the now, and we miss the opportunity of the moment. But when we sit in the now, we engage with the proper vision. And going back to that example of the lightning, in the now, we are sending out signal. Try this pattern, this pattern, this pattern, this pattern, this pattern, and we find it because we know where we're at. We're able to find our future. It comes to us, and it becomes destiny. Because we have locked in the now, we draw our future to us, and all the resources come to us, and we just break bread, and the bread never shrinks, diminishes, because we have latched into the now of our future resource, just coming, just coming, just coming, just coming. So for me, I'm like, I've got a big life change coming up. You know, the team knows this. In this next summer, a big life change, and I'm a little freaked out about it. So I'm still practicing the now. But even this morning, I'm like coming in the office. I'm like, God, I don't know if I could do this. He's like, hold on a second. What did I tell you? I said I'd cover you. I'd take care of you. These are the truths. These are the statements. This is the fact of who I am for you. So you need to rest in you need to take your faith, mix it to the truth, and enter the now and stay in it, and don't let the now be robbed from you, so that the resources for today are at hand. Because and that's the other thing, is if you chase your future, you miss out on the resources for today. An example for my children is I can get anxious, my wife can get anxious about something coming in the next few days. And it robs the joy of engaging with our children in the moment. And we don't become their resource. We don't become what they need. We rob from them. We rob from the engagements that are neatly in front of us, because we fear for our future and our attractions drawn that way. And we miss the opportunity of living the Shabbat Shalom in that engagement with our kids. And so it becomes, the reality is that we don't live in a bubble, right? So living in the now affects not just us, but it affects our relationships and the resources that surround us in that moment, and it impacts what we have right now and what we have in the future. Our bodies are great communicators for whether we're sitting in the now or not. Emotions are great communicators. If there's any tinge of fear anywhere, any doubt, anxiety, you pretty much are out of the now. And that's when you stop and say, okay, why do I feel this? Where did this come from? And it usually points back to a resource issue, a relational issue with your father. And then you correct that, realign it. And then it's like, where did that fear go? It was never there, because I've come back into the now. I'm back into the center of who he is, who I'm intended to be. Birds of the air, fish of the sea, lilies of the valley. Matthew 6. They don't fret. They don't worry about what they wear, what they eat, or their shelter. How much more the sons of God? They are already as I am in my Father's heart. So I just need to sit in the rest and let those provisions come to me and grow in me.